In the Emerald Isle, something unexplainable is happening. Tonight, prepare to witness the most frightening event in horror podcast history. A journey into the depths of horror history. First Class Horror presents the ClassHorrorCast. Evil wears many masks, but pure horror wears only one. Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise, only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.
Paddy Murphy is a filmmaker based in the west of Ireland. Since 2015, Murphy has created over a dozen short films and 3 feature films with his production company, Celtic Badger Media. His feature films, The Three Daunts and The Perished, have had success on the festival circuit, with The Perished securing distribution in the US through the Horror Collective. In 2020, Murphy started a YouTube and Twitch gaming channel called Let's Survive Paddy Plays that has amassed a strong following in a short amount of time. Throughout our conversation, Paddy and myself talk about following your passion, horror movies, what scared him as a kid, the future, and much, much more. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation as much as I did.
I'm going to tell you an interesting little anecdote about working in Extravision, which is that when I worked in Extravision, obviously we would be working, from 10 in the morning till 8 at night or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so we couldn't put whatever we wanted on the TVs in the shop. We could only put on, PG stuff or,
yeah.
So the amount of films that I ended up falling in love with that me and the other staff members would put on just because we were allowed to play them in the shop. And the ones that spring to mind as the 2 that everybody in Extravision just fell absolutely in love with were School of Rock, because we could watch it anytime and we just fell in love with it. And the other was Mean Girls. Mean Girls became the ultimate Extravision film because we could put it on anytime, and that film is so funny. The writing in that film is actually as good as anything I mean, it makes sense when you think it was written by Tina Fey, and what was it also written by the one who played Leslie Knope? I think they co-wrote it. But I just I quote Mean Girls all the time. And I often I was on a shoot this weekend and I quoted Mean Girls. I think I shouted, "I want my pink shirt back," as a car was driving away. And one of the girls on set was like, "That's a Mean Girls reference." And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "You like Mean Girls?" I was like, "Mean Girls is one of the greatest movies of all time," because I had to watch it 260 times in Extravision and I know it inside out.
That's one of my feel good movies if I'm in really bad form or anything like that.
Absolutely, no better movie for it. And I can't wait till my daughters are a little bit older to sit down and watch Mean Girls with them and have them just be like, "You like this, Dad? This is
I've had that reaction a few times as well.
Yeah, and it's just so funny. I mean, to put it in perspective, though, I love horror. I eat, sleep, and breathe horror. But even the new film that I just started working on, we shot a concept trailer this past weekend. It's called Lulu and the Electric Dreamboat. I didn't write it. It was written by a guy that I've worked with a bunch of times named Mikey Casey. Mm-hmm. He came along with this script and he was like, "I don't know if, do you want to read it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And it was a coming of age drama comedy set in 2004 Limerick about this young punk kid kind of doesn't understand his place in the world. And it falls for this girl who is also kind of a wannabe punk goth emo. And I was just reading the script going, this is my teenage, it's like this Mikey followed me around as a teenager and actually just wrote my life. And so I was he asked me would I come on and co-direct, and immediately I was 100% this is everything that I could want. But like people have said to me like, oh, but it's so weird. Like it's not horror, and like we kind of know you. And I'm like, trust me when I say that my wheelhouse extends so far beyond horror. I love everything, and getting the chance to do something like this that is, I mean, it's still weird, and it's still, the way I keep describing it is it's Scott Pilgrim meets 500 Days of Summer.
Nice.
And it's got the weirdness and it's got the kind of music and stuff, but it's just this really sweet, feel good movie, and it just feels so nice to be making that after The Perished.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times as well, like if you're a huge horror fan or anything like that, straight away I think people will just assume that, oh well, if you're into that, like that kind of thing, you won't like this or you won't like that. And then I think there's one step above that then if you're a horror writer, filmmaker, director on top of that.
Yes,
it makes
definitely.
it even worse.
It's you're very much kind of seeing it. I mean, it even happens to some extent with like, even with music, man. Like if I'm in a car with someone and I'm playing a song, like let's say, I mean, just the example, it's a really bad example because this is like, but let's say I'm in a car and I'm playing like an Ed Sheeran song, and people are like, why are you listening to Ed Sheeran? Like you like Slipknot or this or that. And I'm like, yeah, but I like this Ed Sheeran song. Like I just like music, you know?
Yeah.
Or like I got into this band recently during lockdown called Pale Waves, which when my wife heard me listen to them, they're like very kind of poppy. And she was like, what? This is so not you. And I'm like, if you knew all of my influences, like, or like if you knew what the first single I ever bought was, this would not surprise you.
And it's so weird as well, man, because I feel like a lot of people who like I talk to that are horror fans and stuff like that, a lot of them expand into more, whether they're like yourself, like a filmmaker or whatever, or just like, you know, your regular guy. A lot of them seem to be kind of scattered all over the place and have interest or can take things from, like me, for example. I could listen to, I don't know if you've ever heard of like Billy Strings or Marcus King. They're like this weird kind of hillbilly, bluegrassy kind of music. But then 5 minutes after that, I could be listening to Ed Sheeran, and 5 minutes after that, I could be Stone Sour. You know,
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I'd be the very same in that. Like, yeah, I guess the nice term to sum that all up, I think, is eclectic. Like, I think I have a very eclectic taste in music, movies, books. Like, I never like. Yeah, I think it's so dangerous when people kind of pick one thing and kind of. I think people do it all the time, even accidentally. Is like kind of put your whole identity around something. So, like, if you're into horror, horror is your identity. And like, but like you're missing out because you could learn so much, especially if you're a writer and stuff. You could learn so much from watching other stuff than you ever will from watching horror movies, because, you know, when you're just watching horror, you miss out on potential opportunities. A great example of that, I haven't seen it yet, but I want to check it out, is Chris Landon's new film, Friday or Freaky? No, it's just Freaky, isn't it? Like, that's just a fucking horror bent on the Freaky Friday thing. And like, if he hadn't obviously, if Chris Landon wasn't obviously a big fan of like Freaky Friday, he wouldn't have gone, I wonder what Freaky Friday would be like with a serial killer.
And that movie looks very good.
I'm intrigued because I really love what he did with that. I haven't seen Happy Death Day 2, actually, if I'm being honest, but I loved when I saw Happy Death Day, I was like, this is again just Groundhog Day, but as a horror film. Like, that's just genius. Like, and that's what I think people don't realize, is there's so much what I like to call Reese's Pieces in horror, where you can get the chocolate and the peanut butter and get them to mix, and it's gorgeous. But people, as I say, if you limit your horizons, I think you don't get that stuff.
Yeah. What got you, so like, what originally got you into making movies? And
I suppose, like, going way back, I've been writing since I was a kid, like, just constantly. I was always obsessed with telling stories, writing stories, but I never thought that it was anything I could actually, as I say, I went into retail when I was in my teens and just worked there for 10 years and had the soul drained out of me. And then I kind of gave up on writing at that time. And then I moved away to Malta for a year to just work in a bank, which was not great fun, but It was nice to live in a warm country for a year. And then when I came back to Ireland, I wrote a short story called Ensnared, which was it was actually something that was helping me deal with I've been going through a really tough time with my mental health. Mm-hmm. And I'm a type of person, I'm very transparent about that stuff, and I wanted to tackle it in a way that, you know, was kind of visible. And so I wrote a short story about this guy that's caught in a loop, because I felt it was a really good metaphor for like the depression 100%. Guilt loop that I was going through. It was a terrible short film. I mean, I feel bad saying that because so many people worked really hard, and it's not like it's just, you could see in that film that I just wanted to be, in my head, I wanted to be the next Aronofsky or Fincher or Nolan.
Right, okay.
And like it was just notions of grandeur, like. But what happened was I wrote the short. The short won a short story competition, and a friend of mine at the time said, you should make a film out of this. And I'd never really thought of it, but I kind of went, okay, like, let's give this a go. And then I became really good mates with a lot of the people on that first crew. And so then we just wanted to go out and make more stuff together. It was just a case of, this was fun, so let's go do it again. Mm-hmm. And so a year after that short, we went out and we made a short called The Three Daunts, which was received really well when we kind of showed it. We did like a kind of a hometown premiere of the short, and people loved it. So we had two other shorts in that series, and then we went, wait, why are we doing three shorts that are all like long form shorts when we could do one feature film? So we reevaluated, and we just decided that we'd go out weekends whenever we could for like a year, over the course of a year, and we made this feature called The Three Daunts, which in its first incarnation was absolutely awful. It was 2 hours 23 minutes, and nobody should have ever had to sit through it, but a producer that I met at Cannes did, and told me everything that was wrong with it and how I could make it good. Huge shout out to Judd Tilliard. Thank you so much for braving that awful cut of the movie and making me make it good. So we went and we did 70% reshoots. So we spent another year going back out, shooting bits. And then we made a film that to this day I'm still incredibly proud of. We made it for €5,000. And like I met some of my best friends for life on that set, and people that I still work with to this day. And then, that was kind of it. From there, it was like, okay, I just want to do this every weekend, you know?
So is that the point where it like kind of became a reality?
Yeah, I think once The Three Daunts was done and we had our hometown premiere of it in May 2017, and to see so many people laughing and cheering and having fun watching the movie, it was like, I got to keep doing this. This is a high like that I can't get anywhere else. And then, you know, I've made at that time I was making a lot of shorts. I think in the first 3 or 4 years of Celtic Badger Media, that's the production company, mm-hmm. I think I did something like 20 short films.
Wow.
And then The Three Daunts and The Perished. But around the time of The Perished, I really took a break from shorts to focus on. The Perished was a big step up in almost every conceivable way from The Three Daunts, just in terms of cast, the amount of money that we were putting into it, everything, because we really wanted it to be something special. And I think it. To me, it is like, whether, as I say, I don't judge the success of it based on critical review consensus or sales. It's just on like whether I can stand behind it and say, yeah, I'm damn proud of this movie. And with The Perished, I am. But then I never really kind of got back around to shorts again. I kind of hit this point where I went like, oh, I think now I'm just making features. But then I started work on another feature film. Oh, well, I did the found footage film. That was kind of an experiment. It was kind of like, okay, like super limited cast, super limited resources. What can we do? And we made In Memoriam, which I'm, again, really proud of. I can't wait to get it out there. But then I started writing this much bigger film, which is an Irish kind of horror Western called Devils Out West, set in Connemara in 1920. and it's very much, as I say, kind of Rio Bravo meets Hellraiser meets, I was going to say Assault on Precinct 13, but that's redundant because I said Rio Bravo. But meets The Wind That Shakes the Barley. That is one that I'm definitely working to get made at the moment.
I was just going to say that needs to get made.
I'm working behind the scenes. I've made a lot of contacts and friends in the industry through going to festivals and being part of stuff. And so I know that film demands a lot more finance and, attention than anything I've done to date. So, and I did get to second stage of funding with Screen Ireland earlier in the year with the film before everything happened and went to shite. But so I'm not giving up on it. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna I'm working with a producer out in Los Angeles who was one of the distributors on The Perished, and I'm gonna keep tackling it. I've some very big people potentially interested in being involved in casting it. But then it was great that Lulu and the Electric Dreamboat rolled around when it did, because I just wanted to get back to making stuff and get back to going out and shooting stuff with my friends at the weekends. And so, Lulu and the Electric Dreamboat is the current thing, which I'm very excited about. We're shooting that in July and August of next year. We just shot the concept trailer, which we're going to be kind of applying for funding and maybe doing a Kickstarter early next year and stuff for that. And as I say, it's not horror, but I think a lot of people within the horror community will identify with the characters in it. So, in that sense, I think it could still resonate with people from these circles.
You had mentioned festivals and stuff there.
Yes.
I'd seen you were at, was it last year you were at Fright Fest?
Yes, August 20. Well, I've gone every year, as a fan since 2015. And I was actually so saddened this year that there was an online Fright Fest, but I was busy the weekend it was on. But I was like, even if I was busy the weekend, if it had been the actual Fright Fest in Leicester Square, I would have dropped all commitments and been in London for it.
How was that experience?
It was one of the best experiences of my life, just because as a huge fan of that festival and everything that they do for the horror community and everything, the first year I went there in 2015, I was like, I'm making a film. And at that time I was thinking shorts. I was like, I'm making a short film that plays at Fright Fest. And then I tried submitting a short to Fright Fest and it didn't get in. And then I tried submitting another short to Fright Fest and that one didn't get in. And then I was like, I'm just never going to get anything that screens at Fright Fest. And then, The Perished, they were kind enough that when I had the trailer cut for The Perished, the organisers, I sent it to the organisers and they were like, we'd love you to show this at Fright Fest Glasgow. So I went out to Fright Fest Glasgow in February of 2019 and showed the first look at the trailer for The Perished. And then they were like, July rolled around and I'll never forget it because they were like, you're in, but your sound mix needs to be improved. So I got this amazing sound mixer out in Italy called Massimiliano Borghezzi. He had done work on a friend of mine's film Book of Monsters, and I was like, I asked him to come on last minute and just tidy it all up and everything and get it ready. Thank God. And we submitted the final version on 2nd of August, and they were
wow.
Literally right before, and they were like, yep. This is good. I was like, oh, thank God. But the whole experience, that was where I met Joe Lynch, who was my mentor, my hero. I met him at Fright Fest in 2017, and he's the reason The Perished exists. Because I was going to give up on filmmaking at that time, and he was like, you get home and you write another movie, right now. And so that was what happened. Was I got home and I looked at the news and I saw about the unearthing of the graves in Tuam, and I was like, Jesus, that's insane. And that was the linchpin or the spark that started The Perished. So it was kind of like a nice little bit of kismet that The Perished was born out of Fright Fest and then premiered at Fright Fest.
Yeah, that is cool. And Fright Fest is such a cool festival, especially for over this side.
Yes,
to have something
definitely.
Like that. I think, was it 2 or 3 years ago, I got sponsored by Sennheiser to they flew me out to Fright Fest for 2 nights and put me up in a hotel and stuff.
Which year was that? Was that I'm just trying to think of like what type of stuff was there, because as I say, I'm just such a Fright Fest nerd. Was that like Victor Crowley year, or
it could have been? No, I'm trying to think,
because there was like Victor Crowley, Mayhem, the Joe Lynch film, which I absolutely love. Then there was, I think the year after was like, there was, it's always hard to remember like what the Curse of Chucky was like the opening film, I think. But
that
yeah,
might have been, because I remember Sennheiser were the reason I think that they had reached out was they had done some 3D like audio.
The 3D audio short. Yes, I remember that year. Yeah.
Final Stop or something, I think it was called at the time.
I will never forget that I was in the Imperial Bar around the corner, and my friend, another filmmaker, Dave Malcolm, came around and sat down, and he had a bag, and I was like, what's in the bag? And he was like, 3D headphones. I was like, class. He was like, yeah, if you were in that last short that they just did, they gave out free sets of 3D headphones to everyone.
Yep, they surely did.
I was like, are you fucking serious? I've just been here nursing a pint and I could have been getting a free set of 3D headphones.
That's the year, whatever, 2018 or whatever it was.
I think it was 2018, yeah.
That's exactly correct, because I was only recently looking over the emails, and like at the time I think I didn't really process it. Because I think I was writing articles for Rue Morgue at the time.
Oh, wow.
On the website, like.
Yeah.
And I think that's how it all came about. And somebody who works for Sennheiser, I think, came across me on Instagram or something like that, somehow anyway. And like, they treated me so well, man, for just some random phenomenal guy from Wexford.
That's brilliant, though.
Like, got me flights. They offered, they were like, look, if you're stuck for work or whatever it is, we can fly you back the same day. We can put you in a hotel. It's entirely up to you.
That's amazing. And also, I didn't actually realize you were from Wexford, which is amazing, because that's where my granddad was from. I spent so many of my childhood years in Ferns, Wexford.
Nice one.
Yeah, so I have a very, Murphy is a good Wexford name, so
yeah, that's true.
I have a strong connection to Wexford.
There was another question I kind of had there when you were talking about how you got into all this. And I ask a lot of people this because I think it's a really interesting question, and a lot of times people are looking to somebody without putting too much pressure on the question.
No problem.
But like looking out, to people like yourself and whatever who have kind of made their dream a reality. Like, what advice would you give to people who, have maybe dreams or aspirations that aren't your... And not to knock anybody or anything, but there's a lot of people who were kind of stuck in that, what you were talking about, like that Extravision-y GameStop or whatever, wherever it might be, that retail-y kind of thing. And, maybe soul destroyed, and they have dreams of something else, whether it be a writer or a filmmaker or whatever. Like,
I think for me, and this is genuine, like, I think it's all about finding good people to be around. Like, if you can find, like, if you want to be a director or and you find a good cinematographer, and I don't mean good in the sense that they're like phenomenal at what they do. I mean that they're somebody that lifts you up, and you feel like with those people you could take on the world. That is, I think, the most. Even when I speak to people from like LA, voice actors or whatever, they all say the same thing. Like, it's the people around you 100% that make it at all possible to keep going on doing this thing, because it is kind of ludicrous and it is kind of mental.
Yeah. And
I sometimes look at myself and I say, what are you doing? I'm 37 in 2 weeks and I have 2 small kids, and I should be knuckling it down at a 9-to-5 job and taking us on foreign holidays every summer. And then I go, no, you're doing what so many other people who have that life want to do. They want to be sitting in their cold shed writing a script or editing a film or whatever it is. But as I say, I do have those doubts and I do have those moments, and having people like, I have to give a huge shout out here, a massive shout out to Barry Fahey, who is the co-founder of Celtic Badger Media. He's been cinematographer on pretty much every film I've done. And like, Barry has been my rock. And like, anytime I am doubting what I'm doing or anything like that, Barry has been the person who's like championed me and gotten me back up. Because again, we all have those doubts. And as I say, I struggle with mental health problems, and I've always been super transparent about that and stuff. And it is just having a support system to get you back up. And sometimes a support system doesn't necessarily mean that they just fluff you and tell you you're great and that you're brilliant. Having people that will look over your stuff and tell you what's not good or what doesn't work about it or what's not right is just as important. So I think also something I always tell a lot of other aspiring writers is have a thick skin. Like, you really do need it, because the second you start being precious about stuff, like, this is not the industry to be precious in. Like, and it's even when people ask me I often get people saying, will you have a read over my script and let me know? I'm like, I absolutely will, but you have to be prepared to know that I may have issues or may not like it, or, you know, and that is not a reflection on you. And all I'm trying to do is help make your thing better. And plus, my opinions are just my opinions. But yeah, that is definitely, again, at Celtic Badger Media, we've tried to kind of eliminate any kind of a yes man vibe, or people just being like, oh, your stuff is great because we're all mates, and instead being like, no, we lift each other up by also being hard on each other.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like, especially now, like, so many people are getting into different things online and whatever. Yeah, if you're prepared to put yourself out there at all, like, you're going to have to expect to be put down by other people for whatever their reason is, and you kind of have to, you're going to have to go into it having a degree of that. I know it's never nice.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But like, I mean, I don't care who you are or what you make right now. There is like a culture built around putting stuff down. Like, I don't care if it's Avatar you've made.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, sometimes, like, that kind of, there's such a difference, I think, sometimes between negativity and actual constructive feedback. Yes. And like, I mentioned him earlier, but Judd Taylor, who's a producer of ours, the reason that he's one of my favorite people to work with when I'm developing a script is because Judd, he is just so brutal, but in the best, most honest way possible, which means when he says he likes something, you can actually believe it, because he wouldn't if he didn't. And an example of that is I sent him In Memoriam, the found footage film I did, and I was literally sitting there waiting for the 17 A4 pages of feedback of what was wrong with it. And he came back and said, look, I would have feedback on this, and, you know, there's stuff you could improve, but it's in the can, and for what it is, it's really good. The performances are really, really solid. And that was like, I was like, he would not say this flippantly, like, you know. And so, yeah, like, the Three Daunts wouldn't have ended up as a decent 90-minute film if he hadn't come in and been like, see this whole character? He doesn't work. Cut him out of the movie. And, like, at first me being like, what? No, I can't do that. And then realizing, actually, he's completely right. That character does nothing.
Yeah. And like, for, I get a lot of messages, surprisingly, from people who, you see, I think a lot of people as well, I haven't put myself out there overly about, like, personally. And a lot of people assume that I get to, you know, sit at home and buy loads of cool stuff all the time and just record podcasts with people who I love and look up to, which is not the case. And a lot of people reach out and kind of go like, oh, you know, I'm working in whatever, this and that. Should I just quit and go and do my thing? What would you say to someone who has that kind of, I suppose there's a lot of, and I don't want to say, I used to think it was like an Irish thing, but there is a little bit of maybe hopelessness, or Asher, go away now, you can't be writing films, or Asher, go away now, go on, get a job in Jones.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's a tricky one for me, because I look at it this way, that like Barry, who I mentioned earlier, who's my best friend, my support structure and all this, like, Barry has a great job and he works a lot, but that's why he's able to afford fantastic gear that I could never afford in a million years. And so he's able to put that money into what he likes to do, which is cinematography, camera work, you know. So he couldn't do what I'm doing, whereas all I need is Final Draft and a computer, and I can do what I do. So I think I would never suggest somebody just quit their day job and go do this, because when I look at some of my biggest heroes in the industry, they are actually still actively working day jobs themselves. A lot of my favorite kind of contemporary directors are in that exact situation, but I just know the flip side of that is Barry has often said how he would like to have more time to be creative, because he does work so much. He doesn't have the time to sit down and spend 3 days just nursing a script, writing it, you know, and figuring it all out, and then working months and months and months of just tweaking that script. And so, like, I think it is a tricky one, because you'd love to have the time to be creative, but like, I think if you are, I think if tomorrow, if the reality set in and I had to go back and get a day job and work, I would do it and try to keep as much time as I could for creating. But it's just never an easy one to answer, because you have to provide for yourself. If you're somebody living in like Dublin or something, and your flat costs €4 million a month, like you don't have that, or like same London or wherever, you don't have that luxury of just, you know, packing it in. And I'm living in just outside Limerick in the west of Ireland. Rents are cheap. You know, it's not it doesn't kill me to be self-employed. But I know for a lot of people, they wouldn't be able to. You know, one of my best friends is a stills photographer in the UK called Mike Shawcross. He's been stills photographer on all my films. And when we first started working together, he was working at Fujitsu in Manchester. And really only in the last year, he's kind of, you know, he's been working there 20, 30 years. So he was able to retire and, you know, pursue his career as a photographer. So I think it's one of those things that's definitely an individual circumstance kind of situation, but just try to create whenever you can is the main one, I'd say.
Yeah, because like I suppose a lot of times it seems to be I get, you know, questions like could you ask like, so say with your dynamic then when you went fully into all this, how did you, like, obviously you've got 2 young kids and a wife, I guess working around all that, like, how do you think that there's a way to do that, or is it just kind of feel it out? Like, a lot of people I find go like, you know, oh, you know, the missus is kind of on me because I'm a bit obsessive about X, Y, and Z, or...
Well, that is something that, again, I have to give huge credit. Like, my wife, Kathy, has been, since day one, the most supportive human being. When I wanted to be a video game developer, she was like, you go ahead and be a video game developer, don't worry. When I wanted to do this stuff, she was like, you go ahead, don't worry. Because she understands my struggles, especially with, like, mental health. Yeah. And she said, like, I would much rather have you miserable about being broke but doing what you love than have you be miserable doing a 9-to-5 job and not getting to do what you love.
Yes.
And she's so incredibly understanding. That is one thing that I will always say. And that, I know that a lot of people don't have that. And I've even heard that on the movie Crypt. I've heard people ask similar questions, and they're in the situation where their partner is not supportive and does not want them to do it. And that can definitely be an incredibly challenging situation where, again, all I would say, and I know that, again, this is not possible for people, but, I will also just say quickly that I have an incredibly unhealthy work-life balance, so that I'm a little bit, I relate a lot to Adam Green, because when he talks, he's like, I basically sleep like 3.5 hours a night, and the rest of the time I'm doing what I do. I've tried this year, especially with lockdown and everything, to dedicate a lot more time to my family and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I have in the past definitely struggled with maintaining like a healthy balance of spending time with my kids and doing fun stuff with the family, to, you know, compared to going out with my friends and making films at the weekend, and then spending all my waking minutes set in front of a computer editing stuff or writing stuff. So like, it is, again, I think a lot of it comes down to the personality. if you're somebody that's willing to kind of forego a lot of things that other people would maybe not want to miss out on. That is unfortunately the reality of it. And again, I'm just a small dude in the west of Ireland. I mean, if you're someone in LA or somewhere, it's even harder. Like, they really have to. A lot of people that I know that are in the industry in those areas are like, I can't settle down and start a family or have a life right now because I have to concentrate on this side of things. Which is it's rough, like, but that is the kind of sad reality of it. And I try to remind myself of that when I'm like, I don't have any dreams of grandeur of like making a hit movie and then Marvel hiring me and then I'm making loads of mega bucks, making big Marvel franchises. My dream from day one of doing this has been like, I want to get to a point where this is a career that I'm able to make enough money off that I can spend more time with my family and take them on the foreign holidays and stuff like a normal job. But I don't, if that's just making 1 or 2 movies a year that do moderately well and, then that's great. That's all I want, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess also tempering your expectations is another thing, because I've met so many people, especially actors, that think they go literally do 1 or 2 short films and then they're going to be hired to be, lead on a show or something. And it just doesn't work like that. Like, you look at anyone and it's just years of graft for 95% of people. There is the 5% exception to the rule where they just look out and something big happens. But like, and sometimes for those people, that can be a dangerous situation, because I remember I had a great conversation in 2014. I was front of house at a festival, and Jack Rayner attended, and I ended up talking to Jack Rayner, and he spoke about how getting Transformers was one of the worst things that ever happened to him, because it made him think, oh, I've made it. This is it. And like, he realized that when these calls didn't start coming in after Transformers, it was like, oh shit, I didn't make it. Like, I have to, and that's why Jack then did Sing Street, and then you see him in Midsummer, and he's really getting there now because he's gone back out and like applied himself and is attacking it head on. But yeah, sometimes getting that early success can kind of be a bad thing. But yeah, I always look at like people, like a person that I'm absolutely in awe of is like Samara Weaving, and people are like, oh, she just emerged out of nowhere. And I'm like, Samara Weaving was working her ass off for like 10 years doing extras roles in like small roles on like Australian TV shows and Home and Away and stuff. And then, then she got a couple of films in the US and now everyone kind of knows who she is. But it was years and years of work.
And that's the thing, like the internet has been a fantastic tool for most people. I can see there's I struggle with a lot of mental health stuff as well, and there was times I felt like social media probably played a big part in that, because
I totally agree.
Yeah, like I suppose in a way, without thinking, I felt like I was woke to it, or whatever you want to call it, but falling into that trap maybe of being like, why can't I just quit my job and be like that? Or I don't want millions. I just want around the same money I can make in my 9 to 5. And like, I would get really worked up and annoyed and whatever. And I think sometimes people, like you said, like there's a lot of this overnight success. Like I've even heard your name mentioned a few times, and I would imagine, and I don't mean this in an offensive way, but I would imagine probably their version of what your life is like and has been for the last couple of years, let's say, versus maybe the reality of the fact that you're actually a living normal person who has to deal with things the same as everybody else, are like, couldn't be further apart.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you actually another little anecdote quickly, which is that so when the Three Daunts got its release, it was a self-release at first, and like I went to Dublin and got, I think it was 100 Blu-rays and 100 DVDs printed up, and I sold them myself and delivered them to people's houses, drove around dropping them off at people's doors. I didn't even post them. A couple that I did post to the US or UK, but like the majority were in Ireland, and I just drove around and actually delivered them. And I think, so like, just to give a perspective, I think it cost me something like 900 quid to get them printed, and it cost me like, or something like that, and it cost me like $2,000 to like, it cost me like 900 to get all the inlays printed and the cases and the discs, and then I made like $2,000 off it. And I remember at that time just how it happened coincidentally that I'd gotten finance on a car that I wanted, which was a 2010 BMW, and I got finance on it. But all the lads who had been involved in the Three Daunts saw that I was selling the Blu-rays of the Three Daunts and I had a BMW, and their immediate assumption was the Three Daunts is after making a load of money and Paddy's after keeping it, and he's gone off and bought himself a BMW. And the reality of it was so much further. Like, I'm still paying that freaking car off. Like, and I was like, I had to sit down and be like, lads, it's finance. Ye can literally get it. Like, same thing. But like, like, there is an element of that, as you say. I try to be very transparent, which is what, like, even the podcast that I do myself now is about, is trying to showcase like that, like, or even why I do Twitch streams now as well, is just to show like I'm a dude in a little cold shed making stuff because I want to, and there's no like, I wouldn't tell you how much the parish has made so far, but I'll tell you that it is not enough to quit your day job and start and do this as a full-time profession. But it doesn't. I
feel like platforms like this as well, and like what you're doing on Twitch and all those things that are starting to sprout up there, it's good for people in a lot of different ways, just because it connects you with more interesting people like yourself and whatever. But then you'll also, like you said, you'll get a little dose of reality and maybe become more practical.
I couldn't agree more. It's why I always cite the movie Crypt as one of my biggest, my biggest helps, because like that show, Adam and Joe were so transparent and vulnerable about the things that they were going through, that I was able to listen to that show and go, oh my God, these guys that I worship as like titans of the industry are going through the same shit that I am.
Yep.
And that really was the moment where I kind of made the decision that I was going to stay doing this, because it was the moment where I realized that there isn't an on-off switch where you just suddenly are loaded and everything's worked out and you're massively successful. It's like, even when loads of other people, your peers and horror royalty think you're successful, you could still be, scraping by.
Yeah.
I looked at Adam Green. I'm like, this dude's worked with Robert Englund, and he's worked with Sid Haig, and he's worked with all these people. He's friends with all these people. He's got to be the happiest person in the world. And then you hear about his personal struggles, and you're like, oh wow, no, okay, it's not as cookie cutter and simple as that. There's real life always gets in the way of.
Yeah, it's funny.
Stuff.
Like, and I'm the same. Like, I look at things like Hatchet or whatever, and it's like a real physical thing in front of you. And I'm like, all right, this person is like light years away from like where I'm at. And, it must be so much better over there.
Oh, I've fallen into that trap myself a lot, where I've been like, if I just packed it up and moved to the States right now, I'd do so much better. And then, it's a dangerous road to track down. And even then, when you look at someone like Adam, it's like he made Hatchet 1 to 3 and they're this, and then you find out that like he struggled to get anybody to finance Victor Crowley, and he had to go and just make it himself because nobody would finance it. And you're like, I'm struggling to get movies made, and I'm an upstart from the west of Ireland, and this dude who's been making films for a decade longer than me has had what I would consider to be major league success, is struggling to get his films financed. So it just shows there's no difference. We're on the same playing field. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that transparency I think is really good for people, because some people will just take that as a complete negative and go, okay, that's it, I'm finished, I'm done, or this is terrible. Or then maybe in your case, it has huge potential there to inspire someone to come up and either get on that level or surpass that in time.
Like, that's the thing. I think for me, a big part of it was hearing about how helpful and healing the whole process of making films was, or even knowing that like, I can watch Hatchet and it can have such a positive effect on me, and knowing that by that virtue, that has a positive effect on Adam. When I met him at Kansas City and was able to say, or at Fright Fest, and I'm able to say like, oh my God, I fucking love the Hatchet films. I know that makes him go, this was kind of worth it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same. I remember I was at one screening of The Perished in the UK, the same screening where one woman came up and told me, I want to tell you I absolutely hated that movie. Another lady from the Caribbean came up and said, I wanted to just tell you that in the family that I grew up in, if my parents found out I'd had an abortion, they would have literally killed me. She was like, not hyperbolic, like they would have actually killed me. And she was like, and she told me her story. She told me that she did have an abortion and that she could never tell her parents, and that it's eaten away at her for like 20 plus years. And she was like, your film in a lot of ways really helped me come to kind of closure and stuff. And that, like I say, those are the moments that mean everything to me. It doesn't matter that when I look at my bank account, it's fucking empty. What matters is those moments where someone comes up and says, hey, your film had this big, profound effect on me. That's what I live for. And I'm hoping, like with In Memoriam and Lulu and the Electric Dreamboat and Devils Out West, that those films continue that trend of, you know, shaking people's perceptions and maybe making them go, or shaking their perceptions and also helping them, having them say, you know, this film helped me.
Yeah. It's funny, and I think, I mean, I guess unless you're a fan of film or any of that kind of stuff, because a lot of people would ask me, a lot of times I relate back to, and even with horror films and stuff, and that's why I can relate to like what you're saying there about The Perished and stuff. There's movies that I think back to, and it brings me back to certain points in life where I was going through this or that, and like a lot of people don't understand it, but I'm like, no, that movie, you know, meant X, Y, and Z to me, or makes me feel such a way, or I can think about a time in life where, like, I've never really brought it up, but there has been 2 times in my life where I've been like, that's it, I'm done. And genuinely, like, because I know a lot of people go through this stuff, and genuinely felt, I remember looking at my other half dead in the face, and like the little guy is in the next room asleep, and I'm like, there's no other way out of this, like, and just having this stuff there, that little bit of creativity, you know, certain movies or books or games or music or whatever it is, like,
I completely empathize. Like, I will even say that, like, in August of this year, I went the furthest that I've ever gone down that road. And what really actually brought me back, one thing that brought me back was going to therapy, which was very important, and I'm very glad that I did it.
Key. Me too.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But also, I rediscovered my love of music, and a lot of the music that I found at that time has really helped me, like, massively, with dealing with all those thoughts, the struggles. You know, when I'm in the car and I just throw on a song, it can literally, people don't realize that, but like a song in the right moment can literally change everything. And same with the movie, same with the game, same with the book. It doesn't matter, like a piece of media. And that's why I think lockdown has taught a lot of people as well the importance of art again, because I think a lot of people really took it for granted, and kind of were like, didn't care for the artists behind stuff because it was just media, and media is just consumed now. But I think
it's just like another check the box.
Yeah, it's like fast food. It's like McDonald's. It's just get it in as quick as you can.
Whatever. Yeah, seen it.
But I think when there isn't new media being created because of this massive pandemic, it's like suddenly people were like, oh shit, like I care about artists now because I want new media, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's been very good for the arts, and it's reminded the world of why, you know, again, those people that would say, oh, go get a real job when you'd say you want to make films are now like, man, why aren't there more fucking films at the moment? You know, so it's such an interesting time as well for artists at the moment. And like, but also just one quick thing is that a lot of people I've spoke to have said, oh, I feel like I should be doing more at the moment. I feel like I should be writing because we've got nothing else to do. Or I feel like I should be doing, you're doing a YouTube show, I should be doing that. And I'm like, you shouldn't be doing anything. Like, if you want to take this time to spend it sat in the couch watching Netflix, if you want to take this time to go walk to the park with your kids, if you want to take this time doing whatever, just do whatever it is that you want to do. Don't force yourself down a creative path because you think you should because there's nothing else. It's like, no, like, let that stuff come naturally. Don't try and force it just because we're all locked at home.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of people fall into that trap.
Oh, definitely.
And even there's even times maybe where like I felt like I should do more of what I love, but sometimes I make myself panicked by it.
I've seen that happen firsthand with one of my best friends, like where he's as I say, contacted me and said like, yeah, but you're doing this YouTube channel and you're doing all this stuff, and I'm like, I'm just doing that because that's my way of A, because I wanted to, like, and B, because it's my coping mechanism. I was like, but if you're like, he's like, all I've done is sit on the couch and watch fucking That 70s Show on repeat. I'm like, well, if That 70s Show on repeat is your coping mechanism, don't try to make yourself like there's plenty more years there, generally, like, all things going well.
Yeah.
Like, don't take this as like a missed opportunity. Like, there's plenty of time, and just because this kind of catastrophic event has happened, and I think, yeah, it's put a lot of, it's in a weird way put a lot of pressure on a lot of people, that they kind of feel like, oh, I can finally do what I want to do, but maybe I don't want to right now.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, because sometimes I think that people, I don't mean this to sound bad, but I think people, the idea of doing something to a lot of people, and then when you're put in a position to maybe do it, and then you realize, wait a sec, I actually don't have any, I don't have that interest in it. I thought I did. Like, people might listen to, a big one I always see is, people listen to Joe Rogan, and then all of a sudden go, I'm going to get the lads together with a few cans and we're going to have a podcast.
Yep, and that's been big during this pandemic.
Yeah, and it's like, what? And that's grand if that's and you're into that and you want to record your chats and you think it's funny or whatever. And if no one listens or if everyone listens, that's grand. But if you're doing it thinking, well, I'm going to be like Joe Rogan and I'm going to sell it to Spotify for 100 million, blah blah. No,
exactly. It's, as you say, if you're using it, like, that's me with my YouTube channel, man. And I never expected, when I hit 500 subscribers recently, I legitimately, from starting that YouTube channel out, thought I was going to get like 140, which would just be the people I actually knew in reality who would just subscribe to be sound. Like, I never thought that it would be, and I didn't go into it with any mentality of, oh, I'm going to do this because it will attract people and I'll get, I just was like, I want to have an outlet where I can talk about shit that I love, because that's all I want to do at the moment, is talk about cool games or talk to cool people in the industry. And then when other people were like, I like that you do that, and were subscribing, I mean, even now sitting here saying this, I still don't expect it to go any higher. You know what I mean? I don't, in my head, I'm like, if this is the cap and this is where it all ends, I'm totally cool with that, because I had no expectations of this thing that I'm doing. Whereas if I was going into it going, I'm going to have 5 million or 22 million subscribers like Jacksepticeye, and I'm going to be the biggest YouTuber ever, I would be setting myself up for disappointment, and then that would make it, I'd end up resenting it and hating doing it and everything.
And I think, that's the problem. I've seen so many people, like, I've always kind of had the idea for, say, something like what I'm doing right now, or maybe freelance writing articles and stuff. And I was always just afraid, because I was like, if I do it, and a lot of the lads are not really into that kind of thing. And you know the way it is over here, like, it's like, you'd be getting jeered and stuff, and I kind of never done it. And in 2012, I didn't have a great year. And in 2013, I think I just done it. I started it maybe out of the wrong place. I started it out of like a kind of using it as a crutch. I was like, my life is finished and I need to try and like do something to not make me feel like that. And I started to blog and stuff, and I kind of, so like, I feel like that I've always kind of had it in me, and this is what I want to do, regardless of whether one person listens or 100 people listen. Yeah. Or 1 million or whatever. But I've seen it more and more now. Like, I've even seen it with people in my circles. They'll be like, oh, you're doing a podcast and stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's like, 3-4 years now, or whatever. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, I'm starting one as well.
I'm like, all right, and what's it about? I was like, I'm just going to, like talk about games and all, and I'm going to have, something like Joe Rogan. And I'm like, it just, okay, like, I mean, if it works, well.
I get you, I do. And as you say, like, the one thing with Ireland that I've definitely, we can relate on this so hard as well is, like, there's a term in Ireland that you won't hear anywhere else in the world, and I think this term sums up how Ireland feels about anybody doing anything creative and stuff. And that term is, look at your man getting notions. Look at your man getting notions about himself. Thinking, I can make films. Oh, I can write. I can podcast. Man. Look at your man thinking he's brilliant. It really is on a much deeper level, to get kind of deep about it. It is a layover of the kind of Catholic hold on Ireland for so many years of like pride being a sin. Mm-hmm. And so you doing something that you're proud of is looked down upon and seen as a negative, as opposed to being championed. Like if you were in the States and you do that, it's a totally different vibe. Mm-hmm. Here, there is very much this idea of, how dare you try to do something to make yourself proud and happy, and like, you should just be miserable like the rest of us.
And it's funny, like, because that is exactly like, I don't know, there's probably people in other areas that will listen to that and go, oh, that's how it feels in my town or my city or whatever.
Probably.
But Ireland as a whole, and I don't mean to completely shit on the country or anything.
No, same.
But like Ireland as a whole, look, it can be a really good and like pretty safe place to live, and they don't get involved in too much stuff, which is good. But it definitely has this weird, like, soul destroying, who's your man think he is?
Which, I hate to bring this back again, but that's very much what Lulu and the Electric Dreamboat is about. The film we're making is about, it's about mental health struggles, and the lead character in it, a lot of it is to do with, like, he just needs to get out. He just needs to, like, Ireland is kind of sucking his soul out. And that's very much kind of one of the linchpins of the whole story is him not understanding why he's miserable, and kind of realizing to some extent that it is, as much as the film is not trying to shit on Ireland either, it is just saying, like, how for certain types of people, Ireland can be a very difficult place.
Yeah, and I think some people maybe need to leave it, like in reality, maybe actually need to leave, and then there's probably other people then who over time, like yourself, who start to develop the understanding of like, okay, am I going to have my life dictated by this, or am I going to try and do something about it now? And
like, and you still, as I say, like, I think I often say this, that like my whole thing is like, being Irish, I can almost never take credit for anything I've done. I have this huge chip on my shoulder about, like, if somebody's like, oh, I loved your movie, I'm like, oh, it's not my movie. A lot of people worked on it, and we all, like, again, you say that to an American filmmaker 9 times out of 10 and watch them be like, absolutely, I'm so fucking proud of what I've done. Like, and in Ireland, we have this, all you have to do is watch an episode of Black Books and look at Dylan Moran, and you understand what 80% of Irish people are like. We're self-deprecating. We find it hard to like ever go like, geez, what I did was brilliant. That was fair play. Go me. Pat myself on the back. That was a good job. Because I think, again, there is this kind of like unspoken kind of societal Catholic guilt of like, don't be proud of yourself. Stop it.
Like, 100%, man. And like on a way smaller scale, I had put together a little like mini documentary, maybe 10 or 12 minutes long, about like the kind of history of slasher films a couple of years ago. And we had a convention down here, and they were screening like short movies and stuff like that. And they asked me, they were like, do you want to show it at it? And I was like, yeah, cool, whatever. So they show it, and then I didn't realize they were going to do like a little kind of Q&A thing.
Right.
At the end, and they pulled a few of us up on stage, and they were asking questions and stuff. But like that's on a like tiny scale, but definitely like it was a thing of like, oh, people were like asking me stuff, and I like felt like I didn't even want to answer it, because I was like, I had some weird even doing this, sometimes I feel like that like imposter syndrome where I'm like,
oh, you're talking to the king of imposter syndrome.
Because I was going to ask you that earlier when things started to kind of, I don't want to say take off, but like, you know, when things started to kind of turn for you and you saw that this might actually be a thing, or, you know, when you're on Shockwave's podcast, or when you're in Kansas and you're, you know, you're with Adam Green or you're at Fright Fest, there's definitely a level of like, who am I? Or I'm not supposed to be here.
Absolutely. Like I am the worst I'm legitimately the worst out of everyone in Celtic Badger Media. Like I adore Barry because he doesn't have any of this. Like Barry is so good at like, you know, being so proud of his accomplishments and stuff and like selling himself. And I am just not, like, because I am always like, who are you, man? Who are you? Like, and like that, it doesn't matter whether I'm like, as you say, I'm on stage at Fright Fest introducing my movie. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you're not supposed to be here. Go home. Like, big time. I put out a tweet on Twitter probably less than a month ago where I just said, imposter syndrome, my old friend, because just out of nowhere, like doing the YouTube, somebody messaged me and was like, oh, you're getting on such amazing people and this is incredible. And I was like, what is that? Like, what? I don't think this is just,
I've had people reach out to me on Instagram. Now, not a huge amount of people, but I've had, every time anyone reaches out to me on Instagram or whatever, tweets me and goes, oh, I just listened to your interview with X, Y, and Z. That was so cool. And I like the questions you asked and blah, blah. And instantly I just cringe.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I can
someone actually listened to me. And then I'm like, wait, I'm doing this for that. What?
That's the way I get it. People are like, oh, I watched your film. And I'm like, oh, poor you. I'm like, what are you talking about?
It's such a weird thing.
It is. And as I say, I really learned that going to Kansas City or Fright Fest and meeting other filmmakers and seeing how their attitude is so different. Like, their attitude is so much more like, I met a guy at Fright Fest Glasgow this year, Adam Stovall, who did a film Ghost Waits. And, you know, it was his first movie. He made it for a small amount of money. It's very similar in terms of pacing and style to The Perished. But the difference is Adam Stovall is like, yeah, I made this fucking movie and it's great and I'm so fucking proud of it. And I'm like, I've had to condition myself to be able to say those things myself, like about The Perished, because I'm so insecure about, like, whenever anybody asks me, or says, I really want to see The Perished, I default to saying something like, oh, you don't want to watch my sad fucking abortion drama horror. Go watch something fun. Like, instead of saying, yes, it's a really amazing film, you should go watch it, I'm like, I default to like slagging it, because that's just like,
it's weird. Like, you kind of feel like, you know, if you were to be interviewed specifically about the movie or doing a Q&A, that you'll kind of just end up being like, yeah, it's all right. Whatever.
I literally said that in my Q&A with Joe Lynch. I was like, yeah, it's all right. And Joe Lynch was like, it's only all right? Like, are you fucking serious? Like,
and I think people just don't get it. And I do feel like it's a very... No, I'm not saying it's an exclusive Irish thing, but it is a very Irish thing. If you've grown up in Ireland and been here, it's a very Irish thing to do. Like,
there is a definite like trend here, yeah. And like, it is something that I'm trying to over time kind of bait out of myself and get rid of, because I realize that I think if I am treating this thing as seriously as I am, and I do want to keep making movies and I want to keep, you know, I want to make them at a bigger level, and you know, that I have to stop downplaying the things I've done and instead start embracing it and saying, no, like, these are accomplishments. Like, you know, we made a film for, you know, we made our first feature for $5,000. We made our second feature for $25,000. We then made our third feature for 500 quid. But now, you know, like, I feel like, as I say, instead of, you know, going about In Memoriam, for example, oh, it's a stupid little found footage that we made for like €500, I should be like, we made this whole fucking movie for €500, and make that something to be proud of, not downplaying the fact, you know.
Yeah, like, I mean, even, I don't know if you've seen that movie on Shudder, Host.
I haven't, but I've everyone said that it's like the film of the year, effectively.
Yeah, well, like, it like, I really enjoyed it, and like, I actually had time to talk to the guys who wrote it, and
oh wow,
they like, the way they had a kind of very similar vibe to you, and you know, they were just kind of saying like, it felt like someone had flipped a switch, and, you know, we were in talks with Shudder, and now I think they've actually signed on and they're doing like 2 or 3 movies of Blumhouse, and
Oh, that's amazing. It's interesting as well, because a lot of my contemporaries that I started making films with, that I became friends with very early on, I look at their careers, and you always compare yourself to people. And I look at like friends of mine, like Jill Gavargisian, who just did The Stylist. Me and Jill have been friends since 2014. And I look and I'm like, oh, The Stylist has been bought by Arrow and it's huge and it's doing amazing. And then I look at my friend Gigi Saul Guerrero, and she's been signed on by Blumhouse to do a bunch of films. And like, I'm like, you're slacking, bro. You're falling behind. Like, you're not. But it's not. Everyone has their own pace and everyone has their own style. And it just, I have to, as I say, it's another one of those things that I combat constantly, is trying to compare the trajectory of what I'm doing to what the people that I came up with doing. Because it's funny, because like when I screened The Perished at Fright Fest, Jill Gavargisian came up to me, because she was there as well, and was like, this is amazing. Like, you've made a feature. Like, you've made a feature before I ever made a feature. And so like, at that point, she was potentially comparing her career to mine, you know, and like, it's such a, again, these are like little dangerous roads to go down for yourself personally, is to like, and that applies to every element of your life, like whether it be like, oh, your man next door just got a new car, I want a new car. Like, just don't compare the trajectory of others to yours. Like, yours is the pace it's going at for a reason.
Yeah, because sometimes I think that can ruin you as well.
Oh, definitely.
It really can.
Like, it's one of those double-edged swords things, because it can be good, because it can force you to step up. Like, as I say, seeing other people that I came up with doing really well, I'm like, I'm gonna like, Devils Out West is going to be a big movie, I'm going to get it, you know. It can encourage you, but then as long as you don't let it consume you and be like, I have to. If you make it an I have to, as opposed to I want to, or I'd love to, then like, you put this unsurmountable pressure on yourself that you'll probably never achieve, and then just end up causing more damage to yourself than you should. Yeah,
I know. I only have a handful more questions for you, so I'm not going to take up too much more of your time.
No worries. I was going to say I will have to jump off relatively soon, just because my friend in Canada, my former editor, we're supposed to be having a Zoom drinking session. It's our first one ever.
100%. Well, I have a handful of questions here that people sent in to me. So somebody asked if you could make a movie with any existing horror icon or within an existing franchise, what would it be and why?
Ooh. I mean, that is tricky. I would love to say Hellraiser, right? Because it is the film I would consider as one of the films that most formatively changed me, and I would love to tackle. But then I think I'm so scared of it as well. Like, I would be terrified of never living up to what Clive Barker has put before. Like, interestingly, I would love to do an adaptation of Clive Barker's In the Flesh, which is a short story.
Yep.
Like that, and if I did do that, I suppose my dream would be to get like maybe all the former Cenobites as different characters in it. So like, get Doug, cool. get Barbie, get Simon Bamford, and get Nick Vince as characters within that, as a nice little nod to other Barker fans. Yeah, I think beyond that, I think with most things, I've always said this, I'd be terrified of any form of remake, because I just always feel, especially, I think if I was ever going to remake something, I'd want to remake something that was kind of crappy. So like, maybe I'd remake Night Beast. I'd remake Night Beast, and I'd probably want to put like, I'd love to work with Kane Hodder. He is high up there on my list of people that I want to work with. And I actually have a film script and concept that I have Kane Hodder in mind for, that like, I think is possible, and it could happen someday. So fingers crossed.
So someone else had sent in a kind of related question, but I don't think they have any connection to the first person that asked that first question. So they said, what's your top 3 favorite horror games? And if you could make a horror game within an existing series, which one would you like to get involved with?
Very interesting. So my top 3 favorite horror games, I guess, original Resident Evil 3 is probably my number 1. I have a big thing for threes because Silent Hill 3 is another one of my favorite horror games ever. And then Dead Space.
Oh, nice.
Dead Space has always, it's just stayed
So
with me.
good.
This is the first time I ever played it. It's just one of the best horror games ever made. And then within an existing franchise, it would probably be, I'd probably love to do a Silent Hill game, if I'm being honest. As much as I would love to do a Dead Space, but I think a Silent Hill game would be more approachable. I think I spoke recently with Sam Barlow, who did Silent Hill Shattered Memories, and I love the way they approached that game, that they just did this kind of wild reboot of the first story. I'd probably try to do something similar, same universe, but done kind of differently. I suppose because Silent Hill is based on Jacob's Ladder, which is one of my favorite movies as well, I'd probably try and make I'd probably lean more into the Jacob's Ladder comparisons. Funny story though is that I am actually currently working on a horror game. I teamed up with some of my former dev buddies during lockdown, and we started work on a little horror game called Into the Basement. And so we're working away on that. We've got one of the heads of one of the guys at Giant Studios who do like the animation for a lot of Disney shows. Dan, he's involved, and then two of my former dev partners, Owen and Eric. And it's a very, very simple concept, because that's, when you're a small dev team, that's the way to go. It's just basically, it's kind of like what you were saying about, when you were a kid, you were afraid of the dark. That's a super relatable thing. I think most kids are afraid of the dark. So in this game, you're a kid that's asked to go into the basement to get something for their mom.
Nice.
And yeah, when you get into the basement, everything seems to be alive and trying to kill you. So
Nice. So keep an eye out for that then.
Yeah, I'd say it's a while away, but yeah, we're going to be because we're kind of we're not putting any major pressure on ourselves. We're just kind of taking it very slowly. But yeah, it's exciting to be back doing stuff in game dev.
So you're streaming on Twitch and stuff now?
Yes.
So what brought that on? Was it the lockdown that brought that on, or?
Oh, it was definitely the lockdown, because I started with the YouTube channel doing videos, Let's Plays and stuff. And then a friend of mine, Samantha Elliott Brody, suggested that I try Twitch. And I was kind of against it at first a little bit, because I was, again, about putting yourself out there. There's no platform that's more visible. Like, you're so vulnerable. Like, you're live, and basically people, if they were to choose, they could come in and really fuck with you.
Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, I really wasn't sure if I would enjoy it, and I've kind of fallen madly in love with it, because there is such a direct connection to the audience. The people that have come on and watched are so fantastic, like, and just been so supportive. And yeah, it started out with just horror games, but I've really branched it out now. And like recently, I played the Life is Strange, or Life is Strange 2, and that was an incredible experience. I ended up talking to a couple of people that have been involved with that game, like voice actors and designers and stuff, on the show. And I cried for about 80% of that Twitch stream, because that game was so emotional. Like,
such a good game.
Yeah, and as I say, that's what I really get about the vulnerability, is like, if you're playing a game on your own, it doesn't matter if you bawl your eyes out. But like, when you suddenly realize there's like 14 people watching, you're like,
yeah.
They're gonna see me cry.
Yeah, it's a weird one, all right. Eh? You really have to be transparent.
Yeah, and I do. I love it. It's really actually been one of my saviors during lockdown, has been Twitch, because it has made me feel like I'm connected to people still.
Yeah, and that's what I think this has been for me, and realizing that whether your community is one person, 2 people, 1 million people, whatever, that connection, I think, and lockdown and COVID and everything is kind of, I would suppose, like, it's teaching a lot of people that, like, without those connections, things get really weird.
Yes, absolutely. And on top of that, what I learned when I first went to Fright Fest in 2015, I learned like how, when I went to that event, I was like, I got on with absolutely everybody that I met. And the reason I got on with absolutely everybody that I met is because we all had this same shared love of something. Yeah. Like, if you saw somebody with a Freddy Krueger t-shirt, you're like, oh my God, you like Nightmare on Elm Street. I love Nightmare on Elm Street. Let's talk about that. And it's the same with this. Like, if somebody comes on, they see you're playing Life is Strange. Like, I've become really close friends with this awesome girl named Jessica, and that's because she came on when I was playing Life is Strange 2 and was just like, oh my God, this is my favorite game ever. And then we just immediately
cool that's there as well, though, that exists.
Oh, absolutely. And like, as you say, lockdown has shown people that. And I would have been one of those people that back in March, I thought Twitch was so stupid. I was like, why do people watch other people play video games? And then I've come to realize that people don't go to watch other people play video games, they go to watch other people. And then the video game is a secondary thing.
Yeah. And it's that sense of community or whatever.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and it's like watching somebody else experience something that you're really passionate about. Yeah. Is definitely a big thing. So
I guess then let's fast forward a little bit then maybe. I don't want to call it, I have it written down as post-COVID. I don't know if we can, I think I kind of jumped ahead a bit there with that. I'd say we have this for a while, but so what's the future look like?
Well, as I say, I'm really excited that we just did the concept trailer for Lulu and the Electric Dreamboat. I'm really excited about that. Like, there was a point during lockdown where I thought I would give up on filmmaking because I just felt so detached from it all because I hadn't worked on a film it felt like for so long, even though I did In Memoriam in December, it still felt like ages since I'd worked on a film. And I was kind of saying to Barry and everyone, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go back to all this when things reopen. And when I read the Lulu script, I was like, I would do anything to be involved in this movie. And that reawakened the beast. And so like the foreseeable future is definitely get the concept trailer edited, maybe do, as I say, a Kickstarter or something to try and raise funds for the film. Even use platforms like Twitch and stuff. A lot of people that come on and watch have said, like, do a fundraiser on Twitch and we'll help out. It's great again to have those avenues. And then we're aiming, as I say, to shoot it in July, August of next year in Limerick. Whether we raise funding or not, we're going to go make it anyway. But yeah, like that's the next thing. And then beyond that, I have a short film script that I really want to make called Kilcannon, which is basically the Friday the 13th mythology idea, but about a hurler.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so you've got this hurler that comes back from the grave to defend his pitch.
Deadly, I love that. I love that.
I'm really excited about that one. When I sent the script out to people, they were like, this is fucking hilarious. We have to make this.
Love that.
It's kind of I would be dedicating that film to Adam Green because it's very much like my little homage to Hatchet.
Yeah.
Even more so than Friday the 13th. But and then as I say, Devils Out West is something that's going to sit on the sidelines for a little bit while I figure some other stuff out. But it's definitely not going away, because I think it's a concept that just has to get brought to life. And I'm always thinking up ideas. I came up with an idea a couple of weeks ago, which I actually pitched in a one-pager to Fangoria Films for a vampire horror comedy set in the west of Ireland.
Oh, cool.
Which I described as The Field meets Fright Night.
Nice crossover.
Yeah, The Field is my favourite Irish film of all time. So I was like, I want to remake The Field, but as a vampire movie.
Nice, I like that. Different take.
Yeah, exactly. Again, if you're going to remake something, do something wild with it. But yeah, so I'm always kept busy. And then I suppose outside of that, the YouTube and Twitch, I'm going to keep doing. They've become part of everything that I do now. And yeah, it's been great to get so many cool guests on the show and stuff from like voice actors and stuff. And just want to keep that growing as well and keep meeting new people through that. And yeah, that's basically, and then obviously spend time with my wife and kids somewhere in there.
That somewhere in there. Well, I really, really, really appreciate you coming on and taking the time.
Oh, look, no problem. It was a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
It was really good to chat with somebody who's so like-minded as well, and especially to be from the same country. There's so much to relate to there.
Oh, definitely. It's always a pleasure. I like, one of my favorite things in the world is to talk about these things that we love. Like, and I know you obviously feel exactly the same, which is why you do this. So yeah, I've enjoyed every second of it.
Okay, so last thing then, where can people find you? Anything you want to plug or your links and stuff?
I mean, for anything to do with the films, the best place to go is probably just www.celticbadgermedia.com. that is where you'll find kind of all our short films and any news. There hasn't been any news for a while because of COVID, but any news that we would have would go out there. And then that's anything film related. That's the best place to go. It'll take you to our YouTube and our Facebook and everything from there. And then for my own stuff, youtube.com/Let's Survive Paddy Plays. It's a bit of a mouthful, but Paddy Plays and Let's Survive were both taken, so I had to just use the whole big long thing. But yeah, it's the same on Twitch, so it's twitch.tv/Let's Survive Paddy Plays. And yeah, I'm on Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday, and I try to put out a YouTube video at least once a week. I was doing one a day at the start of lockdown, which it was disgusting. I should have never attempted it, and I ran myself into the ground with it. But yeah, one a week has been a lot more achievable.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. That's tough going.
Yeah, it was not clever. But yeah, I'm very active on the socials as well. So if you go to any of those, there should be links off to Twitter and Facebook as well. And yeah, I just like talking about this stuff. So if anybody does have any questions or anything at all, feel free to contact me at any of my socials. Because yeah, I love talking.
Yeah, well, I'll link everything below anyway. So wherever you're listening to this, whatever podcast platform you use, this will probably go on YouTube and everywhere else as well. So just look down below. All the links for Paddy stuff will be there.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.